We are now working on volume 2 of Old St. Vincent at Latrobe, Pennsylvania. This shows the place when the Benedictines arrived in 1846. There was actually some structural stuff there. The old church at the top of the hill was built in 1839. The pastoral residence to the right had been built just a little bit later. Sometimes a black and white image gives a better indication of structural features and landscape. This was 1887. 1887 was the year Boniface Wimmer died. Boniface Wimmer was the fellow who founded the place, and it gives a good impression of how much happened there since they arrived in 1846. A lot happened. One thing I want to point out is over here. This was the original boiler house, and in 1887 they were installing dynamos or generators in there to power the place with electricity. The clock tower had been built, the quadrangle was finished, there were the outbuildings, and there was even such things on campus as a photo studio or gallery. Apparently they were doing photography at that early time. This shows another view of the completed quadrangle. Placid Hall over here, and Anselm Hall and Gregory Hall. And here is another shot of the older boiler house. The building in the back here, this is the newer built boiler house, probably built in the 1920s. This is the machine shop, place where I worked. I worked down here on the ground floor. And the upstairs was the tin shop. This is another view of the whole area, including outbuildings. This being Sauerkraut Tower up here. The top of that had big tanks which held water, supplying the whole institution. The height gave it good gravity flow. This down here was the brewery, St. Vincent Brewery. Over here was the malt house, which made the malt, which flavored the beer. And here was St. Vincent Mill, which gave the brewery grain. Grain is what they started the distillery process with. And I worked there with old brother Joe in the 1960s. We were making flour at that time and grinding grain for the farm, for the animals. These are some of the outbuildings. This was the piggery. Once upon a time, pigs were kept there. Here were the carriage sheds where the buildings, or the carriages and wagons for the farm were kept. This is not one of my photos, but it shows St. Vincent's Shaft, which was a mine, commercial operation on the property, but it was not St. Vincent's mine. It had been sold. This is my attempt to try to show, put the location of the old St. Vincent Shaft in the context of the contemporary campus, contemporary meaning 2015. The Basilica, a drawing I did looking over top of the apple orchard then. This was part of the original quadrangle. Some of it had been damaged by the fire. This part over here, the top floor of that had been taken out. You can see in the background the new monastery. This was Old Bede Hall. I think it was a nice old building. There was no real good reason to take that out of there, but that's not my decision. Another shot of Old Bede Hall. Another shot of the remains of the quadrangle. This area up here of elevated ground was where the original chapel or church built in 1839 had been located. That was totally wiped out by the 1963 fire. Here we see Andrew Hall. Andrew Hall was the connecting unit between the original quadrangle and the basilica. The upper part of this was the choir chapel. Down here was originally the monastic library, and then it became the monastic refectory.